Okay, well, welcome everybody. We've got another session of our Black History Conversations, joined by some very special people today, which is wonderful. So I'm Liz Millman from Learning Links International, and we've other colleagues here with us. So we're just going to share the screen to recall that we have our guest speaker, Velma McClymont. We're going to be talking with you, Velma, and hearing your exciting news in a moment or two. We're also hoping that Makapi Selassie will be joining us, and we've got also two of the Windrush Network, Windrush Allies Network with us today, June Elizabeth and Roland, so that's really wonderful. I'm in Australia, so I acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which I'm currently living, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I respect their elders, past, present, and future, because this land belongs to the sovereign people of the First Nations. It was never ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. And we also recognise that it's the International Decade for People of African Descent. So we've not got so many years left in this decade, so we need to make the most of it. And at some stage, I hope that Vereen Shepherd will join us from Jamaica because she's been very much involved in this. So, welcome to you, Velma McClymont. I'm so thrilled that you've been able to join us again. I know you had a hassle getting online. I don't know why people are struggling at the moment, but maybe some other people are struggling, but they'll join us as time goes on. So, first of all, Velma, big congratulations, because you were one of the 13 recipients chosen by the Weekly Gleaner for their very first UK Honours Award 2022. And I understand that your award was for the category of education, for tirelessly promoting reading amongst Black children and young adults, working with schools and libraries to promote resources, and being a scholar activist and a philanthropist with a long history of engagement with Black communities. How fantastic is that? Many, many congratulations.
Thank you. Thank
But,
you so much.
but the other excitement at the moment, of course, is your book.
Finally, listen, finally, it's like having this tooth that nobody can pull, and then eventually it's pulled. But I must apologize. Juanita, come back on the camera if you can, please, so I can see your face, if you can. Apologies. So this is my very, very old computer. I told you I couldn't get on the other two, so the camera is not very good on this. I don't know if you can see me. It's sort of fuzz from where I'm at. It's really quite fuzzy. Is it fuzzy? Can you hear
It's
me?
slightly misty, but it's
Yeah,
fine.
because it's really old, and I was shocked when it came on, because normally this computer never comes on. It's one of those things you abandon, like a pair of whatever, and then one day you got to go and use it, find it. So I'm grateful to it and the ancestors that it's actually working today, because the other one is sitting here, my new one, can you see,
Oh, yeah.
behind me. It just won't come on. It's absolutely crazy. I don't know why. But anyway, let me calm myself. Yes, it was lovely to receive the award from the Gleaner, because I've literally been working in schools and libraries for 30 years. I cannot believe it. My first book was published in February, God, you hear that? Even my brain, 1993. So it will be 30 years next year. But obviously, prior to that, I just worked in everywhere, community groups, you name it. I've done it, rolled up my sleeves over the years, but especially in Jamaica. And that's my pleasure hearing, your colleague who just left, and he spoke about the books and Juanita for the interior, because I've spent a lot of time in schools, libraries, but libraries are more in the city parts, but in rural Jamaica, I've spent a lot of time in schools, because as Liz will tell you, Juanita, you don't know, I walked 3 miles to school in the hills of rural Jamaica, where I carried water, wood, and rock stones on my head. So I make that point wherever I go in the world to speak, so people know I'm coming from a long way, and I must acknowledge my ancestors because of the hard life that they endured, just so that I can be sitting here now. So it's very important for me to get that over first. So where do I begin? As Liz said, Little River is, can you see it? Remember, this computer is not very good.
Yes, we can see it. It's lovely. And I say it's a book because it's published now, isn't it?
Yes, yes. Finally, it's fun. Listen, 6 months ago, this book should have been out, but one thing led to another, and the cover you have on the blurb that you sent out, I literally sacked the designer working. So just by seeing that cover is enough to put me in a temper. This book cost me a fortune to bring out, but we're not going into it because it's a relief to finally have it out. Now, the important thing, as I said, you can see it now, Little River, and it says a historical novel about the Scottish sugar barons in Jamaica, 1731-1812. Now, really, for me, what is important about this novel is that it encapsulates all the research that I've done over the years. As Liz has heard me say this before, Juanita, you haven't, and I think June Elizabeth has, and Simon, I don't know, Roland. And so we're talking about research in Barbados, St. Lucia, Jamaica, Scotland, America, and of course here, and I've spent time in Wales as well, but not North Wales, where I really want to go, because you will hear about Gifford Pennant, the Pennants in here. So anything that you can think about in the 18th century will be in this. This book also writes back to white women writers of the period. And it is fact and fiction, because obviously my research is in it. So it tells the story in a nutshell. I know some of you would have heard it, but for Juanita's benefit, Juanita, I'm giving you some time. I've neglected you. So let's just in a nutshell say, this is about the Scottish sugar barons who went to Jamaica. So you have a young boy, Duncan Fuchs. He's Hutchison at the beginning, but when he goes to Jamaica, like many people, he will change his surname, because you know this obsession with name changing, etc. So I take you to Scotland. The important thing about that, the book points the finger at Scotland and England, of course, for their role in the transatlantic slave trade. But I have 6 Scottish surnames to draw on. So I'm not going down this kind of academic route tonight. Today, because I'm not sure your time, I'm actually just going to be a storyteller today. I shall speak what comes to me. So you are in Scotland in 1731 with the boy, the 11-year-old boy, who is going to be the man, the slave master, so to speak, whether we still say that. And I specifically set this in the Highlands because I wanted to take you into Edinburgh, but I then wanted you to travel on the ship from Scotland to Jamaica, so that once the white elite, once you see them settled in Jamaica, I could then take you to West Africa, which is Nigeria, because it really was Yoruba people coming through. I desperately wanted it to be Ghana, but it just wouldn't happen. Everything came out, it was always Yoruba. And I thought, I'm fighting this. I've got to stop fighting it. So it's Nigeria. And then I bring you back on the slave ship because I want you to see the different experiences, how different to travel from Scotland. and how it would be if you traveled in chains and what happened on the ship. And then what you will see is the rise of the plantocracy in Jamaica. However, by now it's 1765 because Duncan is a grown man. And you will see the racism where it is coming from. You're going to live on the plantation and you will see our ancestors, you know, working in the fields. You will see the adultification of African children. But I also give you in chapter 2, pre-colonial Africa. So you can see patriarchy. So for instance, this particular, it's 3 volumes, by the way. So volume 1, the patriarchy, volume 2, and volume 2, Juanita, volume 1 is 1731, as it says, to 1812. Volume 2 is 1800 to 1912, and that will be Motherlands or something like that. Volume 3 is 1900 to 2014. If you remember the Glasgow Olympics, when I take you back to Scotland, in that time, you would have lived with 6 generations of white women, and you are equally going to see how the interracial mixing. So the book really is about white legitimacy, policing the boundaries of whiteness in elite society. It is about the plantation house, so we won't call it the Great House. And it's how Black women, African women, maneuver within the system. It is also, there's so many themes in this book because what you get is a multiplicity of voices fighting to be heard. And so therefore, with the traditional everyday story, you might get maybe the main character and a few others. But this is the 3rd-person narrative, which enables me to bring in the enslaved Africans, to draw in other voices that have been subsumed and silenced by writers, as you know, British writers of the past. It is, as I've said, it's about correcting unreliable past narrations as well, of how that representation of Black women coming down the centuries. So what you will get, in order to do so, I want to show you that our ancestors fought back, that they weren't silent actors, if you like, passive, sitting there. So I give you Seraphima in the Great House. I give you Christopher. You will see how Christopher, the white boy, is going to grow up to be obsessed with her even when he marries. And you will see that Seraphima, it could look like complicity at times, but you see how she negotiates her way in this rigid society, which is the plantation house, etc. I give you Monifa, who is 10 years old when you meet her in Nigeria when she's kidnapped. And she will be taken to Jamaica. But before I go any further, remember I said this book points the finger at England and Scotland. It is not only England and Scotland. So when we're coming back from Africa, West Africa, we have 5 merchants on the ship. The ship is called the African Empress, and I'll tell you why in a minute. These 5 merchants are Dutch, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and we will have an English, but Scots, you know, the captain. Now, the reason for that, Juanita will know this, and many of you on here, is because I want to show you the Portuguese. I want to show you Brazil. I want to show you Senor de la Vega. I want to show you Spain, the influence of Spain in Cuba, because the next book is set in Cuba. I also watch the other, Holland, so the Netherlands, yes? So I want to show you the different colonial powers and how they exploit it. So it's not just England and Scotland. So you get that from the beginning. You get Monifa, and I take you to Elmina as well, which is very important. Then Monifa is 10 years old. She will be taken, she will only go to Jamaica in transit, and she will be taken to Cuba. And you won't meet her again until she's an adult. But her brother, Kalu, is going to become the Maroon. But the book is set in St. Anne. So I know you know St. Anne, Liz. Juanita, I'm not sure if, do you know Jamaica? I can't hear you. Just click on your unmute. No, I'm saying, so the book is set in St. Anne. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry, I was just going to say I'm going to Jamaica next year, which will be my first time.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. You must go to St. Anne.
Yeah.
Now, St. Anne is the most famous parish in Jamaica because it's the largest, because Columbus came ashore there, because the Spanish are said to have fled the shores at Runaway Bay. Columbus is said to have come ashore at Discovery Bay. You've got Dudd's River. It's the Garden Parish. It's the middle parish. So the book, and that's where I was born, and Garvey and anybody else who tell me, Bob Marley, etc. But what is important is that you often hear about the Maroons, but you hear about the Trelawney Maroons. You hear about the Leeward Maroons, you hear about all this. So I give you Kalu, you meet him in Africa at 21 years old, and when he's transported, but the book is also about crossing, boundary crossing as such. So we are going to have a physical landscape, as in the sea, ship, road, land. It's a spiritual landscape, because you will see Monifa later when you meet her, and she's the grown-up priestess, midwife. And of course, the deities as such, where, you know, Papa Legba or Yamesi or somebody, and you will see Kumina. Kumina, it's only brief, and Mialisms, very brief, but the reason why it's brief is because this is the development of the other books. And so what I'm giving you, it's also Africa in the Caribbean, African retention, because I'm writing back to the white writers of the period, and I'm more or less saying, you actually don't know these people. You've enslaved them, you've changed their names, and you've tried to make them docile, but you don't know what they think, what they do, all of these things. And so you have this war going on in the book. So boundary crossing is also to do with time, temporal. So you can jump forward in time, back in time as such. But what you get is Duncan, and you get the plant, you get the overseers and the lower class whites. So the book is very much about class, the white elite, and those who do not make it, as in walk-foot buckrers. It is also pointing a finger at the church, how religion was used, yes, to make enslaved Africans more pliable, docile. There are many words that are not coming to me right now. So you will see throughout, you will meet the Rev Mackay at the beginning. That's the finger at the Church of Scotland. You will meet Reverend Ellis later. That's the Church of England, and we know that they owned enslaved Africans. And throughout, Haiti is in the background, because by the time you come to 1795, we have the Maroon Wars happening in Jamaica. It's all in there. The Fedon Revolt, Berbice, anything that you can think of that was happening, hurricanes, it is in this book because it is the story of the Jamaican people. But the other islands are equally, not on the same level, obviously. They're represented because if something happens in Grenada and it's at what, 1795, and we want to hear about Dundas in Scotland, when it's the Haitian Revolution, Toussaint Louverture and the French coming to Jamaica, they're in this, Pierre Fontaine and his family. So you can see how I've used history and literature, marry up the two, and then I'm saying to the white writers of that period, I am correcting unreliable narratives. So a key text, if you like, that has helped me even before I started writing was Thomas Thistlewood's Journey. So you're going to meet Thistlewood in here. He'll be at the dinner table, briefly talking. You'll hear about the Zong. I really can't tell you if there's anything Napoleon, Admiral Rodney, the Duke of Wellington, the British Army, the Redcoats, because when I was a child, we had a song about the Redcoats, but I didn't realize we were singing about the British Army and the fact that they were hunting the Maroons at the time. So in this, you are going to meet Colonel Orlando Hemmings, and you'll fall in love with him and his lover, Eaton. But Hemmings is gonna marry and, you know, he's bisexual. So everything, somebody can find something to relate to in this book. Then you are going to meet Nana. Nana is mixed race. And Monifa, later, Monifa's daughter, Monifa really looks after it because Monifa understands we can never be free, not at this period in life, yes, unless we do something. So she realizes my descendants can be free. I can't be free, but my descendants can be free. And you're going to see how her daughter has a child for Pierrefontaine, who is the slave master of Lafayette, another plantation, because they're two, Canongate, Scotland, the key plantation, Lafayette, yes, French, and then Ginger Hall. So it's all you've got. You literally got a cast of 1,000 in here. You will love Kumasi, the enslaved African. You will love some of them when they fight back. You know, I love the characters. And what I'm going to tell you is that in, Claude McKay gave me this story, by the way. He's my favorite writer. So he gave me this, literally gave me this story in 1999. I'm not going to bore you with it. Every time I put it aside and decided I'd finished with it, because I'd been to Claude McKay's house where he was born. I went to the church, the school, exchanged, and after that. And so McKay, when I won a scholarship, McKay gave me a blank sheet of paper. I didn't understand it. When I was in Jamaica on Garvey's birthday, he gave me an empty plate with the poinsettia flowers around the rim. I didn't understand it. Later, when I was writing and the book was being rejected, and I thought, I've had enough of this, McKay came again. And McKay literally was in a library in New York. I told you, Liz, I think, when I spoke last time. So McKay was looking for a book and I thought, oh my God, it's Claude McKay, I need his autograph. He won't look at me. I woke up and I thought, I'm going to New York. I discovered the annual or National African American Conference was happening. I took myself off there. I met the curator of the national, now what is it called? It's the National, something like African American Burial Ground Monument, Raoul somebody. And he said, you must come down as my guest. I went down to this place. It's a museum, right? And then outside, I don't know if you've heard of it, Juanita, or visited it. Anyway, it was a burial ground for African Americans in the 17th and 18th centuries, but when it's between Wall Street and the financial part of the city. So they dug up this place because they needed to make more financial houses. And people like Maya Angelou, Toni Morrison, and others went mad. And so they had to reinter some of the remains, but the others were moved. So it's like a mound of earth, I can't remember, maybe 200 and odd remains. And then there is the door of no return, this monument. And inside the museum, you will see all the artifacts from the period. It broke my heart, and I wept and wept. And after the guy had finished, he said, I'll get somebody to show you around outside. And so, you know, it's the door of no return. And when you walk through that door, I mean, I have to be careful. When I read chapter 2, I'm not sure I can actually read it because I cry. And so when you walk through that door, even now, you literally weep for your ancestors. You weep. And so I told them, okay, then this book, I can't find a publisher for it. Inspire me, do something. And when I went back to the apartment, that was it. I was floored. And I just fleshed out chapter 2, which became set in Africa, because I had no plans. I didn't think I could write a chapter set in Africa, although I had done an MA in post-colonial studies looking at African women's writing and Chinua Achebe, etc., Ngugi wa Thiong'o. I just found myself, I fleshed out the chapter in New York, and then I came back to London, put it aside, but McKay wouldn't leave me alone, because McKay was a man, you know, of his time. He didn't get to write what he really wanted to write. And so he literally entrusted me. If somebody gives you an empty plate, if somebody gives you a sheet of paper, lined paper, folded into 2 halves, they want you to do something. And eventually I wrote the book, and it was rejected by all these publishers. And I thought, this is absolutely crazy. This is my 5th book. I've been published 4 times before. What is this? But various things happened. Anyway, long story short, was George Floyd died. I set up Woman's View, a virtual platform. And from that, I was remembering Garvey saying, we need to own the means of production, you know, and also this nonsense with publishing that we're always begging publishers. And one of the things about publishing is that your manuscript never looks the same when it comes back to you. You've got to be very careful when people edit you, because, you know, your voice, everything, dialogue, things change because they want to sanitize the work. And so I thought, this is nonsense. I am going to do this myself. I'm telling you, it's a labor of love, 23 years old and thousands of pounds. I shan't go into it. Plus a lot of charlatans, people who Oxbridge educated people edited. They've been absolutely useless. I wouldn't name them, and I haven't acknowledged them. But then you have to go and re-edit the thing yourself. I've been paid out thousands because editing is not cheap. Because this book was 440 pages. Wow. And with the new font, it's down to 300 and odd. But the long and short of it, here we are with this. And in December, just gone, last December 2021, on Christmas morning, I could not believe it when Claude McKay came to me and just looked at me smiling in his short sleeve white shirt and a mustache. And he was just looking at me and smiling. And I thought, McKay is finally happy and approves of this book. And I know that my ancestors approve of it, because believe me, this book has been with me in Jamaica so many times, because I take it to rural Jamaica and I write. When I'm writing, it's been to New York, so obviously I wrote chapter. It's been to Scotland. This book has been to, by the way, Barbados, St. Lucia, Jamaica, New York, Scotland. It's just been everywhere. And so I'm very excited, as you can hear, and gone off on a tangent. And plus I've walked up the whole of Glasgow and then rewritten and, spoken a lot in Scotland. So this book is also written for Scotland, because people in Scotland do not know their history. And I have 5 Scottish surnames: McClymont, Morris, Smith, Jackson, and so forth. Yeah. And so basically, this book needs to get into. This is not about, it's good that the Black community of people buy, but I understand as a writer, what it needs is it needs to get into the right places, because it's also about decolonizing, as you know, our libraries and curriculum and English literature. We need alternative voices. And also, it's all very well talking about all the writers we have. Believe me, 30 years on the road, I have met most of them, right? And so in one way, shape or form. And I feel the time has come for new voices, but what we do not want is for people to hinder us. My ancestors have actually been on this journey with me. Claude McKay has been on this journey with me. So it's very important that if you have a sense of, what is the word I'm looking for? It's not a sense of pride. If you are conscious of your African heritage, what has happened to us in the new world on this journey, your role is basically to help to make sure this voice gets out there where it needs to go. So one of the things I think, and to myself all the time, it's not always about a Black person pushing to get this book out there. It's about anybody, allies, removing the obstacles in my way so that the ancestors can speak and that we can honor them and negate the unreliable narratives that have come down to us from slavery. Because I've wept in archives in Barbados, British Library, Scotland, everywhere for my ancestors, and now we want them to be heard. I think I've got overboard. Thank you.
Well, I don't think you've gone overboard. I think you've just been absolutely fantastic. That's such a fascinating insight into the story. And I know you've spoken with us before, but you're going to speak with us again because it's just so intriguing. And I've been waiting with bated breath to get my copy, and it's being sent from the UK now over here to Australia, so that'll be wonderful. And I know it's so well respected. I read some of the reviews on it, and Sir Jeff Palmer, who, as you know, is based in Scotland and has done so much good campaigning work. I mean, he is just so complimentary of this, and we've done quite a lot looking at the stories of Scotland and history, and David Alston's book.
Yes,
we launched that book on our platform and talked about the fact that the Scottish people just don't know their history. I'm not saying that the English or the Welsh or the Irish know it any better, but
yeah.
I think there was a negation by Scottish historians about their history, and that's really quite serious. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I've got to cut you. Think of Professor Sir Tom Devine. When I tackled him in Scotland in 2014, he absolutely refused to talk reparations or anything. And when he saw me coming, he turned tail and walked the other way. It's like, who is this small Black woman? She's been a nuisance now.
Carry on being a nuisance, carry on. Anita, I'm going to ask you, have you got some comments to make? This has just been the best session. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's just, thank you for that, Velma. It was really interesting, actually. And I was, all I could think about was what events we need to hold with this book. Because as you were saying, with the work that David's done, and then there's a book by Thomas Harding called White Debt, that's also about the Demerara Rebellion, and again addressing the issue of the Scots. And I could just see a panel of three.
Well, I'm leaving it to you then. You make it happen.
Like, panel of three discussing it. It'd just be so interesting because I mean, first of all, I love fiction anyway, and I just love when fiction and history meet. So I think that's and it's a perfect way of getting a really wide audience, because not everybody wants to read a history book, but they love a novel, so I just think that's genius. But yeah, I think there's definitely an event to be held. I'm actually trying to hold an event with the Guyana High Commission, and I'm just wondering if what would be nice is to hold an event with the Jamaican High Commissioner, Guyana High Commissioner, and have a discussion that's kind of more broadly about the Scots in the Caribbean.
Yeah, you could do. I'm jumping in. I will be having something at the Jamaican High Commission, so I'll get back on that. But what I think would be good is I have a gripe with the British Library, so I'm always writing, if they have Black events and it says paid, I write to complain that our ancestors, have actually paid the price, so we shouldn't pay to go to the British Library. They're always writing me back polite letters, so I'm not sure, because I'm a bit of a nuisance it's not nuisance, it's activism, really.
Yes, yeah.
So if you can do something there,
That would be
or somewhere
interesting.
else, because the Jamaican High Commission will be doing something.
Yeah.
Or maybe the BCA, I don't really know. I don't know where you are in London or wherever, but somewhere that...
Well, I'm in Senate House, but I'm in Senate House, but I do have contacts at the British Library and at the BCA, where I do hold events at the BCA. So it might be nice to do it at the BCA. But I think what you're saying is really important about the audience, because I find that whenever I do events for the Black community, mostly they know this stuff. And really, the people that have been really shocked by the work that, the things that I've been working on and sharing it's with the white community, and suddenly you realize they know nothing of this history. And so I don't know, I think I like the idea of doing it at the British Library, because I just think you'll get a broader range of people. So we'll see. Yeah, let's see what we can do. But it sounds fabulous. I'm excited by the book, I have to say.
Oh, thank you.
Have you written the trilogy already then?
Listen, my hands are worn out. The whole thing is written, but because it was so long, I therefore had to decide at what point could I cut it as a standalone, as a standalone to begin with, and then the next. So it's all there. It's just a matter of then moving to the next one.
Right.
And incidentally, before we go any further, David wrote to me. He bought a copy of the book, but I confess to you, obviously I don't know, David couldn't say, because I was having so much trouble for 6 months getting this book out, and literally having to get rid of editor, typesetter, designer. This book has been designed 3 times.
Wow.
Liz has seen the first one. I didn't even have time to write back to David to say, apart from just thank you so much for whatever, because my head was elsewhere. But I do hope at some point to catch up with him, because I know that he wrote about his book and what it's about, and Jamaica. So there is that. But you are right, especially in Scotland, by the way. If you jump into a taxi, they come to the hotel to get you, McClymont, they're almost on the floor when they see you and you're Black. They're like, McClymont, where did you get that name? We didn't know Black people had, and you have to explain their history all the time. So yeah, thank you for that. I think you will love it. You'll love Nana. Nana is the mixed race little girl. See, I'm actually talking to Juanita today only because I haven't seen her forever, but that's not really the reason.
This is perfect. It's lovely for you to...
It's not really the reason. It's almost like there's a new audience and a voice wants to come out to say something to Juanita. So you will love Nana, because Nana is Monifa's granddaughter. You're gonna see how she raises this, even though the mother is there, you will see how she raises this granddaughter to carry herself a certain way, to not be afraid of anything. And by the time Nana is, say, 21, you will see how she jumps ship. I'm not giving too much away in Cuba. Okay. And you will see how she sets up house with the white man, Ferdinand de la Vega, because Nana speaks Spanish and she speaks French because I educate her. Because remember, I'm writing back and showing, I show you Monifa as the herb woman and the midwife. She's indispensable in both plantations. So I want to show you Black women, how they really maneuvered in that system and the secret life as well that they lived. So Nana, you will see how Nana then becomes that key actor, and her daughter Sierra. So you're going to hear all about the mulatto, quadroon, octroon, mustee, so that by the 6 generations, you will be hearing them saying, oh, but we're not Black anymore. We haven't been Black since Sierra, because now Rafe is going to be white and furious when he finds out he has Black ancestry. And so, but Nana is key. She's going to live to 112 years old to see her white descendants, and they will want to reject her. And so forth.
That reminds me of the story of Dorothy Thomas in Guyana. So she was a Black woman who was a free, but she had managed to secure her freedom, but her children went on to marry white men, and then and increasingly the generation just gets whiter and whiter until her great-grandson, she lives long enough to see her great-grandson, and he pretends he doesn't know her, even though he inherits money from her. But it's now quite a well-documented story.
Oh,
I'm trying to
never
remember.
heard it.
Oh, it's fabulous. I'm trying to remember the name of the author of the book. I think it's one of the books is called Enterprising Women.
Oh.
Let me see if I can Google the name.
Well, you could always, Liz can let me have it as such, or send it via Woman's View to me.
Woman. Let's see the title.
Fantastic. So I'm just still in awe of the effort and energy you've put into.
Liz, I have not had a choice. I've not had a choice. My ancestors demand that they must be heard and that their story has to be told, but it has to be told by somebody who is proud to be a Black woman. And not just that, a Windrush generation, somebody born in the Caribbean on the soil. We're not talking about City Kingston. We're talking about a child who walked 3 miles to school, carry water, wood and rock stones. And I knew my great-grandmother who was born in the 1880s, and she knew her great-grandparents enslaved Africans as such. So the important thing is this book needs to get out. McKay, really, I love McKay's writing most of all, but it's the two together, McKay giving it to me and approving of it in the end, and knowing that my ancestors did not get an education, and even, you know, in the 1900s, of course, my father later and that. So it's all about making the ancestors proud to know that you haven't forgotten where you're coming from, and you're giving voice to their experience of enslavement. Yeah. So, but equally, Duncan, Liz, at sometimes you're gonna like Duncan, but I make sure he's punished. And at the end of the book, I make sure an alternative voice comes in to remind you, when you're crying for Duncan at the end, to remind you of the things that have been done in Duncan's name. But it's also about what, Liz, one of the scary things about this book, but wonderful things, is that when you are in Scotland in 1731, you're going to pass the Kirk of St. Giles. Remember St. Giles? It's just been in the news for a reason. Then Duncan sends money home, his collection, yes, to the Kirk of St. Giles. It's his conscience money. When Duncan dies, he's going to lie in state. So I've had to do it in a way, a lead coffin, but because there were some around then. He will lie in state at the Kirk of St. Giles for 1 day in Edinburgh. To my horror and shock, when I finished putting the finishing touches to this book the other day, the Queen dies. Where does she lie in state? the Cathedral of St. Giles. That is actually the Kirk of St. Giles. That's what it used to be called. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up because I'd literally just finished writing. I said, wow, this book points the finger at the royal family for generational wealth accrued from the transatlantic slave trade. From the very beginning, when this second chapter, you will hear about Elizabeth I and what's his name, Juanita? John Hawkins.
John Hawkins, yeah.
You will, and the family. So you will hear about the Stuart family, the dynasty, and the generational wealth that has come down. And obviously, when you're thinking about the Jamaican people's story, we are talking about generational poverty, right? And so by the next book, you will see the poverty coming. But the other thing to remember about this book, when I've said boundary crossing, so there is time back, forth, you will jump 5 years maybe, or go back in time a bit, but this is also about religion. So it is about African retention. Later on, so this one, if you imagine the plantation, the slave masters want the body. The church wants the soul, if you like, the mind, etc. So you're going to hear all about that around the dinner table. This is about transculturation. So you're going to see how British culture was transported to the colonies. You're going, every painting on the wall, maybe David at the gate of somewhere, Daniel in the lion's den, Caravaggio, Titian, somebody, Bacchus and Ariadne, all of, because I love art as well, all of these paintings, but they're reproduction because they tell you, when you're reading this book, don't take anything for granted. The paintings on the wall are reproduction for a reason, because we are reproducing British culture in the Caribbean. There's a smattering of Latin, there's maybe the odd Gaelic in it, smattering of French, obviously Jamaican Patois, Creole, and Standard English. And you will, many quotations, philosophy as well. So this is a learning tool. It's not a book to say, oh, isn't it wonderful? I've read it and it's great. It's about slavery. This is a learning tool. Transculturation. It's about race, class, gender, language, naming, not just naming the enslaved Africans, naming the land, naming ships. So watch out for the ships as well. So there's a lot about journeying and water. I cannot tell you the amount of themes in this book as such, but remember at the end, this is about reparations. It adds to the body of literature, yes, on reparations. This book calls, it's about reparative justice as such. So always remember, this book is, it's everything that I've said, transculturation, everything else, but it is really me calling for reparations for past wrongs, what has happened. I do not speak for everybody in Jamaica. I do not speak for Guyana and all. I speak for my ancestors. And my late father is actually buried in Ghana because he went to Ghana. So everything to do with Ghana, I love Ghana. So I love Kumasi, the word Kumasi. So hence I give you an enslaved African called Kumasi in here. But European culture, remember, and white women and white legitimacy. So you must have white children. So then when you meet the mixed race children, don't assume they're just there because I put them there for window dressing. They're there because this is about a study in black and white, a study in, you see, so it's about color consciousness. I cannot tell you the amount of the themes that are in this book. It is literally exhausting. It's a labor of love. And that's why it's
Can I ask you, why is it called Little River?
beautiful. Thank you so much. Now, I grew up in the hills of rural Jamaica. There's Edinburgh Castle, look it up now. My family owned at one point 43 acres of the Edinburgh estate. Louis Hutchison was a white man, a Scots, the last white man to be hanged in Jamaica. So his story is told in here. Remember, this is, so if you see the road, you can't see it here. There's an old road here. So up in the hills, there is a river. But by the time you reach down here, when I was a child, the river had dried up. And every now and again, water along here would just spring up on the road. And as children, we just used to stand there, didn't understand it. But then my grandmother explained the river had gone underground, but you know, like if it rains heavily or whatever and it swells, you know, then water comes up. So it's a real place. So remember what I said is physical naming.
That's so interesting. Edinburgh Castle in St. Anne's.
Yes, and I have deliberately blurred it because for copyright purposes, because I took this myself, but it's now a heritage site because I went to the place, but you know, I've been trying for years, but I didn't have to do it, luckily. By the time I went back to Jamaica in 2015, they had done it. And this is what we are famous for in the hills. When I was a child.
It says online that Edinburgh Castle was built by Jamaica's earliest recorded serial killer.
That's what
called Lewis Hutchinson.
It's in the book here. So Duncan is that's why Duncan is called Duncan Hutchinson. Because, and then Duncan changes the name to Fuchs. And of course, Duncan goes to the castle to see him, but you're going to hear, because it's a real story. What I'm trying to do, I just told you, I'm marrying history and literature. And so you will hear about Admiral Rodney. Do you remember Admiral Rodney? Who saved St. Lucia for the French? He's actually buried at St. Paul's Cathedral. So I equally went there to see the sarcophagus of Admiral Rodney. Admiral Rodney apprehended Louis Hutchison in Kingston Harbor because Hutchison had red hair. And so Admiral Rodney, of course, you can imagine being rather dashing, is mentioned here. So I've done the legwork. I've been to, you know, Nelson, you're going to hear about Nelson as well. And all of these, but yeah, Little River is a real place, and every now and again the water comes up.
That's amazing.
Oh, how fantastic.
It just excites me, really.
Well, it's exciting the rest of us. So the most important question now is, how do we get copies of it?
Well, I know you're in Australia, so it makes it slightly harder.
I don't mean me, I mean people in the UK.
Right, people, Woman's View, the website, I'm going to tell you why in a minute. It's www.womansview.com. It's a hardback book, so it retails at £20 hardback and £5 postage and packing. Trust me, this book is heavy. When you go to the post office and the envelope to put it in is way over that £5. But you can't, you know, if the book is too expensive, then it's a waste. People are not going to buy it. It will be in paperback, which obviously will be half the price, but you normally traditionally bring out a book, as you know, Juanita, and lives in hardback if possible, and then maybe 6 months to a year. So www.womansview.com. And it's, if you're in Australia though, that's my only worry. I went to the post office. Not for you, but others.
Other people, yeah.
It's quite expensive. It's about £17 postage to Australia and about 20 quid to Jamaica. I went and weighed it to check, but in European Union, I think it's about 10 quid, and in this country, and that is not even adding on for anything else. So that's my only worry. The sooner it comes down to a paperback, the better. But my aim really is it needs to get into not high school. What's the equivalent of high school? We do have some, I tried very hard to keep away from expletives, but if you're on the slave ship, for instance, with the sailors, then you are going to get the swearing and the violence and all of those things. So it really is colleges, university as such, because remember, this is also about decolonizing as such literature. I know many people say decolonizing the curriculum or decolonizing the library. This is decolonizing English literature, because if you've done English literature of the 18th century, anything to do with how those writers represented African women and characters, you can see why you have to write back to them and say, hang on a minute, you don't know anything about their secret lives. There's a hand up.
I can't tell you how wonderful it's been to hear you talk more about this wonderful book, and I'm sure many, you know, were really interested to be able to read it. And I think historical fiction, I'm a convert, it's just a really good way, I think, as Janita said, to be able to get to the story. But also, this is a highly educational book. It's a learning tool. And so with its transculturation, its reference and importance in terms of reparations and reparative justice, all these threads, I'm sure that you so clearly demonstrated, are woven throughout the book. So it will be absolutely fascinating. So I hope that when a few of us have got copies of the book and been able to read it, that we can talk to you some more, because it's just so fascinating to hear directly from an author, and particularly somebody with as much passion as you've got. So I'm going to say thank you very, very much indeed, because we've got another colleague who's joining us in a moment. But Janita says, Anissa says, the book is called Enterprising Women. Gender, race and power.
Liz, if you just send me, because I'll dash off and start writing something else, I might forget it. So just email. You know what it's like.
I just to get you really excited about this woman, she was an enslaved African who'd been, I think her mother was free. She was free. And then somehow she became like the Oprah Winfrey of the Caribbean. She was so enterprising. She became so wealthy that and made money from huckstering. And then the British imposed some sort of tax on the freed women of color who were then making money. And so this is an apocryphal story about her, but she is said to have taken £5 notes and sewn them together and made a dress and traveled to Britain and challenged King George V. Let me just say,
when was it? George III? When was it?
So this would have been about 1824 or thereabouts.
Oh, that was the other son, the younger one by then, isn't it? Because George III. Is it the fourth? Wasn't George III in his madness by then?
Yes.
It's the son. It's the son, isn't it? Who took over before Victoria came.
Yeah.
Remember, and he was quite.
I can't remember. All I remember is that she was successful and they cancelled the taxes that these women were being charged. So she's just an amazing woman, and she made so much money that actually white men who wanted to run plantations used to go to her to borrow money. But I just found it. I mean, she's obviously, you just think that if she was somebody who'd been born now, she would have taken over the world, because she's just so enterprising. But the story is really, really fascinating. And she sends all of her children, she sends to Scotland to be educated.
Brilliant.
You know, so it's just a really unexpected story, and amongst all of the other stories, you know. So
I want to say to you, if you knew somebody who was an artist, I mean, I can see this dress with all these £5 notes sewn, you know, into it, and you could get an artist to do something
That's
with that.
such a great idea. That is such a great idea. Definitely. I get the name of the artist has popped straight into my head.
There you go.
So I will definitely speak to somebody, because there's when Thomas Harding was doing his book, he wanted an image of Jack Gladstone. So I got a Guyanese artist to do a kind of his imagined idea of what Jack Gladstone would have looked like. And it was brilliant. It was really, really good. So
Okay.
that's a great idea. I don't know why I
There you
thought of that before.
I told you I love art, so you will see in the plantation house the amount of paintings that are there, but obviously reproduction for a reason. Is it Simon has a hand up or not?
No, I think he's just not got his speaker on.
All right.
Simon's very quiet today. He has his daughter at home with him.
Oh.
He's had a problem at school and had to go home. So, well, we're small and select, but we're nevertheless absolutely fantastic group. But thank you so much. I'd now like to, thank you again. If you need to leave, then do. But McCarthy is going to tell us about. He's done a PowerPoint. It's a first draft about the left behind us. Now, McCarthy's family. McCarthy, are you there? This is the little problem with the Zoom.
Hi, Liz.
Good. How are you, McCarthy?
Well, I'm all right. I'm now on the way to the court. I took a bike, and then the bike had a puncture, and then we fell off the
Tales of
bike.
woe today, McCarthy.
Yeah, I know.
So,
And I went to the court. I just got back, and I thought, all right, let me just eavesdrop on the Black
all
History
right.
conversation.
Now, do you want to go through your presentation today, or would it be best to leave it till another time?
Next round would be good, I think.
I think next time would be great.
Yeah.
I don't want to pressure you at all. That's just the case. And I just wanted to so McCarthy, so we'll listen, next week when we've got more time, that will be fine. So just back to you for a moment, Velma, just to say, is that book cover all right?
Well, I need you to take that one off. Every time I see it, I get in a little bit of temper. Seriously.
That's all right.
Is the original one, and I paid this woman a fortune, and in the end,
We'll take that one off.
Yes,
so
please.
Is because I can't see your copy. I thought I'd got a different one there. Because I looked on Booktopia, and it was the Booktopia site that.
Oh, they haven't changed that one yet.
So it's quite different, your cover.
I've made a point so that it's completely different. She was so unprofessional, not that we should be complaining because I'm all right now, that I don't even want to see anything to do with her work, because she cost me a fortune and the stress. But we can do, I'll send you, if you want to just, in terms of to archive, when you're archiving it, I can just send you the flyer of this one and you can put it on there.
That would be. So I've just popped a quick email to you, so you've got that. So I don't know. Here we are.
Listen, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to.
We've got this right now. We haven't got the picture of the book, but when you send it, and then we'll invite you back in the new year, please, Velma, when some of us chance to read the book and the reviews are coming out, and we'll help to promote it. And we'll also make a big issue to get our Jamaican colleagues joining us as well. It's a little early.
Excellent. Thank you, Liz. Lovely to see you, Juanita.
You too, you too,
Hope
Velma.
the artist gets that work done. I've got a dash because I'm speaking tomorrow and I haven't done the presentation yet. So
I'll
catch up again soon.
Okay.
Take care
Congrats on
then.
your award as well.
Cheers, cheers. Good to
Cheers,
see
cheers.
you. Take care
Okay,
then.
bye.
Liz, bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye. Cheers.
Yes. Wow, that was absolutely fantastic. So on that note, Simon, if you're there, I'm going to ask you to wrap up the recording for this week. It's been